What's up, y'all? The NBA season has concluded, and I want to talk about it. Specifically, I want to point out 5 things that I feel like I learned from these NBA finals. After that, I want to talk about two rumors I've been hearing as far as this offseason goes. But let's start with the NBA champions, the New York Knicks, and specifically my guy, Mike Brown. Mike Brown, for the 5th time, I believe, is an NBA champion. Other 4 times as an assistant coach. So for the first time, Mike Brown got to hold up that trophy as the head coach of the NBA champion New York Knicks. And I have one thing I learned from this. Something I've been believing for a little bit of time now, but this solidified it. This sealed it for me. Coaches evolve and improve just like players do. Mike Brown has never been a bad NBA coach. He's never been a bad basketball coach. You can go back and watch those original LeBron Cleveland teams. They got after it on defense. You could even argue, I was listening to Brian Windhorst talk about this on his podcast the other day. You can even argue that he found some structured offense to put around LeBron in a way that hadn't been found yet, even if we all could watch it and see there was maybe some things to be desired there. So this is not to say Mike Brown was ever a bad coach. Mike Brown is a significantly better coach today than he was when he first took over that Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team. He's a significantly better coach today than he was when he took over the Los Angeles Lakers. He's a better coach now, a significantly better coach now than he was at that time. And that's something we don't always think about when it comes to coaches. We assume a bad coach is a bad coach and will always be a bad coach. Similarly, we assume a good coach is a good coach and will always be a good coach. And I'm sure there are some Warrior fans and some fans of some franchises who would argue that second point. We're not even here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about how coaches can improve. Mike Brown used to frustrate me as an offensive basketball coach. Again, there's probably some credit I was not giving him for what he was able to do with those Cleveland teams. If you look at what those offenses looked like before Mike Brown got there and what they looked like after Mike Brown got there, I'm sure there was some improvement. It was still like pulling teeth watching that team try to craft offense around LeBron James, especially in those playoff runs. This Knicks team won the championship. They won the championship for a lot of reasons. They won this championship because after that second loss to the Atlanta Hawks in the first round, they figured out how to be a structured, focused, offensive team. They're always going to be prone to Jalen Brunson playing a little bit of hero ball, functional, effective hero ball, if that. They're always going to be prone to that. Fourth quarter comes around. It's going to be a lot of standing and watching, letting Brunson work. But what they found around karl-Anthony Towns, who we'll get to later, as a hub, as a passer, as a playmaker, literally took them from a team that could, maybe even should win the East, should make the NBA Finals, to a team going to win the Eastern Conference Finals and nobody was going to stand in their way. And Mike Brown deserves a lot of credit for getting that out of this unit, a group that for years under Thibodeau, at least a couple years under Thibodeau, had been struggling to crack that very thing. How do you form offense with this team? Obviously, the talent's there. Obviously, even the meshing of the talent makes sense. There is a contender in the mix, in the mold. Like in this team, you can mold a contender out of them. Thibs couldn't quite crack it. Thibs is a great coach, couldn't quite crack it. Mike Brown, earlier in this season, couldn't quite crack it. There was a story every 2 weeks, it seemed, about how the Knicks were struggling to figure out what they were supposed to be. Whether it was Towns maybe frustrated with the lack of touches, other players frustrated with Towns and his effect, whatever it might have been, players frustrated with Mike Brown. And they cracked it. They cracked it at the most important moment of their season, second round of the playoffs. They cracked it and they became as close as this team could probably ever be to a well-oiled machine offensively under Mike Brown, under a guy who I watched for the Cavaliers and I watched for the Lakers, who I knew as soon as he took over that Lakers job, he was going to piss off that fan base with how that team approached offense. And that Mike Brown evolved and changed and worked for the Warriors. And he's talked about how working for the Warriors and working with Steve and working with that franchise made him a better coach. And it's clear when you see what this team just pulled off that not only can coaches evolve, Mike Brown made himself available and able to grow and change and evolve and even be molded somewhat by that Warriors experience and came out of it. He's one of the best coaches in the NBA right now because he just won the NBA championship with a team that, again, a lot of us thought they could get there, thought they should get there at the start of the season. I don't know if any of us were there when the first round began. I'm sure some of us were. But they won a championship with a team that I don't think any of us thought they could really win the chip, right? I think we thought they'd lose to Oklahoma City. I had some belief that they'd be able to give the Spurs some trouble based on what we had seen during the regular season. But he took the New York Knicks to the NBA championship. And that is, to me, there's examples that you can point to, but none greater than comparing Mike Brown in the late 2000s, early 2010s to the Mike Brown in 2026, who is an NBA champion. It's not just players. It's not just players that can grow and evolve and improve. It's NBA coaches as well. And Mike Brown is the epitome of that right now. Second thing, he did it, man. I wouldn't say I was totally in Becky Hammon's camp as far as Jaylen Brown is too small to be a 1A on the championship team. I'll put it like this. I started to believe the Knicks had a real chance of winning this after they swept the Cavs. And even in my belief in them, right? I thought if they were going to succeed, it was going to be because Towns was the best player on this team, or at least the most impactful player on this team, right? We kind of saw it happening. Brunson had his moments. You just look at plus minus. Towns being on the court was the most important piece for the Knicks' success for the majority of this run, right? You could argue until the end of game 2 of the finals. Towns' on-court impact was the thing carrying the Knicks to this point. Not like the sole thing, but that was the foundation they were building this streak off of, right? Jalen Brunson's the 1A, just straight up. As much as I wanted to think of Towns as that guy, as much as I wanted to give credit to OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, who all deserve credit, OG and Towns particularly, Jalen Brunson was the guy. He was the 1A. He is the finals MVP, no doubt in any of our minds. And I don't care how tall he actually is, if he like 5'11", if he like 6'1", 6'2". He proved to me and proved to us, Becky Hammond, whoever you want to say, hey, he's not too small to be a 1A on a championship team. If anything, he is next in the line of the Iversons and the Isaiah Thomas. He is the next small guy, next short player to show us that you can win and be the guy and hold up that championship trophy and hold up that finals MVP trophy. Steph doesn't count. Obviously, Steph's taller than we think. Not like tall, but like Steph's a legitimate 6'3" with some good size on him. That's not the same as an Iverson or Isaiah or a Jalen Brunson. And Jalen Brunson is now in that category with the Allen Iversons, with the Isaiah Thomases, as one of the most dynamic short players we've ever had. Chris Paul obviously deserves some love as well. Chris Paul and Iverson, the ones that weren't able to win rings. And Jalen Brunson, you're in rarefied air, man. It's you and Isaiah. There's not a lot of other people on that list, if any at all, who can say they were the guy, and clearly the guy on a team that won a championship at 6'1" or 6'2" or whatever they're listed as. But as we all really know, these dudes are 6 foot at best and maybe not even that. So salute to you. I always knew you were great. Going back to that series against the Utah Jazz when you were in Dallas where Luka was hurt and you just handed Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz their lunch for a couple of games and really put that team in a good place once Luka came back for y'all to pull up that upset. I saw it then. I saw the vision. This dude was good. Totally understood why the Knicks paid what they paid. Was blown away by him taking less, which I should probably talk about too. The point is, though, I believed in this guy as a good to great NBA player. I didn't think you could necessarily win a championship with this dude as your main guy. He proved me wrong. He proved all of us wrong. And he did it. I just want to shout out the contract to players of Jalen Brunson's stature, effectiveness, star level. They don't take pay cuts to help the team get built out. Even I think the two closest examples we could probably come up with are Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki. They both did that on the back end of their careers, which again, shout out to them too, because a lot of people don't. Kobe didn't, LeBron didn't, Steph's not. Most of these guys don't take less money on the back end. So shout out to Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki for doing that. Jalen Brunson was set for a huge payday going into what was going to be the prime of his career, the time where you're supposed to get the biggest bag possible. And he took less, I think over $100 million less than what he could have taken just over the course of a 5-year contract. I might be selling that a little too much, but I think it was close to that much. He left that on the table so this team could be built. And to give the Knicks credit, they actually built it. Sometimes guys do that. I mentioned Dirk a second ago. Dirk took that pay cut, and Mark Cuban proceeded to do nothing with the space that he created to help that team continue to compete for championships post 2011. To the Knicks' credit, Jalen Brunson took that discount, and the Knicks used that cap space and got Mikal Bridges and paid OG Anunoby that contract after they traded for him and made that big trade, risk, if you want to say, to trade for Cat. So shout out to Brunson for taking the pay cut. I believe it was still an $100 million deal. I want to say 110, 111, somewhere in that range. So it's not like my man did not make a lot of money, but took the pay cut. And shout out to the Knicks for taking advantage of the space that was created there. Let's move on to Cat. My guy did it, man. This is the thing that made me the most excited, I believe, during these playoffs and during this run. Towns has been a punching bag for a lot of folks for understandable reasons. I'm sure I've even punched that bag a few times. He did it, man. I don't even know what else to say besides he did it. I mentioned it a little bit earlier when I was talking about Mike, even a little bit when I was talking about Jalen. Karl-Anthony Towns was so central to the success of this team, was so central to this championship being won. I just want to make sure we don't lose that in what was a weird last 3 games of the playoffs for him. They weren't great. Just we can say it straight up. The foul trouble thing that we were all worried about, going back to the Minnesota days, him and Jaren Jackson used to struggle to stay on the court. They were kind of competing to see who can make the dumbest fouls back in that series back in the day. And it reared its ugly head again. He was constantly in foul trouble the last 3 games. As a result, wasn't very effective in those 3 games. He did have a very big step back 3 in the mix there, which might be his only fourth quarter points. He might have got a layup somewhere in there too, but he only had about 5 or 6 points in the fourth quarter during these finals. That 3 hit was a big one. But besides all of what happened in the last 3 games, I will say, I feel like the refs were not necessarily bad in this series. I think they let a lot of physicality go, which I think we're all okay with. There was a stretch where they let a lot of physicality go. Then they realized it was too much. I want to say like game 3, maybe 4. Then they started to tighten it up a little bit. But even then, I felt like that was a two-way street, and it just felt weird because there was a lot of players, Legler and Richard Jefferson mentioned it even during the game of just, it was kind of a whiplash of you're all letting us play as aggressive as possible. Now you're calling everything. But even there was consistency there, right? I think the refs overall were consistent. Don't think either side had much to complain about, except Towns was in foul trouble those last 3 games. Towns was getting a rough whistle in those last 3 games. And I will say OG a little bit in game 5, second half of game 5 also got a tough whistle. But Towns got a rough whistle. I think 3 times, somebody said. I remember 2 of them. Vaguely remember the third one. But 3 times, there was a foul called on Wembanyama. The Spurs challenged, take away a clear foul that shouldn't have been called. And again, if all three of those situations, if the Wemby foul is taken away, I get it. Each of those situations, I believe Towns was assessed a foul also in that challenge, right? Not only did they revoke Wemby's foul, they would give Towns a foul in those moments. And they just kind of felt like BS for the most part. I think the push in game 5, I understand it. You kind of have to call that one, especially the precedent you had set so far in that game where two other players had done a push with the hands and you had called it, one on Fox and one on Mitchell. So I get that one. The other two, you can just let them be no calls. That's the cool thing about the challenge. You could just take Wemby's foul away, which you should have in both of those moments. You didn't have to give Cat a foul in either one of those moments, though. So Cat got a weird whistle. We don't need to focus on that. Whole point of bringing up the last 3 games is just to make sure we focus on what happened before that. I mentioned it earlier, Towns becoming essentially a hub to their offense is the thing that started this streak, right? Towns is the reason they were able to get to that place. And it felt like the first time he got to fully be what he wanted to be on the offensive end of the court. Towns is one of the coolest, great offensive players in the league in that he doesn't need to be the source of the offense as a scorer, like so many people I think in his position would want to be. He's talked about it. He wants to be more like Jokic. He wants that opportunity to be more of a playmaker and distributor like Jokic. And while the Knicks have been finding and searching and figuring out ways to make that possible over the last couple of years, you will see glimpses of it, highlights of it. The most that they ever figured it out was after that second loss to Atlanta and that run that they went on from that point until game 2 of the finals, where they didn't lose. Just straight up, they didn't lose that whole stretch. And a big part of it was Towns being the hub of what they did offensively. He just straight up outplayed Wembanyama in games 1 and 2 of the NBA Finals. Just imagine saying that at any point over the last 2 or 3 years to somebody. Karl-Anthony Towns is going to clearly outplay Victor Wembanyama in the first 2 games of the NBA Finals. I would have thought you were crazy. You would have thought you were crazy. Anybody would have thought we were crazy for thinking that. And it was true, and it was right there. And he stepped up. He was owning it too. The way he was talking that, you know what, at the end of that half, every time he got a bucket on Wemby in that game too, I was euphoric. I was euphoric. I was enjoying every minute of it. I was so happy for my man Towns in that moment. Again, wasn't great after that. Foul trouble was a whole thing. I just want to shout out Towns because he really did that thing and he really put him in the spot. And I want to shout him out for one more thing. Again, a lot of stars in Towns' position that have been so central to how this team was playing well would not be as willing as Towns was throughout the entire playoffs, especially the last 3 games of the series, but throughout the entire playoffs, of letting Brunson be the guy who closes the games. Because no matter how effective Towns was during the first 3 quarters of a game, despite how that plus minus might look like, Towns is the clear carrying force for this team, and they're struggling even when Brunson is out there without Towns. When the 4th quarter came around, the ball was going to be in Brunson's hands, and Brunson was going to take them home. And Towns didn't say a bad word about it. You could argue maybe even wasn't aggressive enough at times, but didn't have a bad thought about it, didn't say or show any body language against it. He knew that Jalen Brunson was the guy to take them home. And despite the fact that he was clearly the most effective player on the team, just impact-wise, if we just want to look at plus minus or whatever, he had no problem letting Jalen Brunson be the guy that was going to take them home in every 4th quarter. And as a result, he's a champion. Jalen Brunson's a champion. Mike Brown's a champion. Shout out to OG Anunoby. Shout out to Mikal Bridges. My man Jose Alvarado. This is a really fun basketball team. It was hard not to root for them, man. As much as I love the Spurs and love what they're building, it was hard not to root for this New York Knicks team. And I'm happy to see them hoist up that trophy, man.
And suddenly ground is breaking, and sound abound by the faking, profound and crown for the making, and shaking like earth is quaking, rebirthing and sounded aching. I worked around more than making, and now it's yours for the taking. Implore, explore, and ignore, find core, mind all your lore, restore, start grinding more, shining time like what's in store, unwind so it ain't a chore, no one faint.